So perhaps Lydia and Mark can just introduce themselves, please.
Yeah, hi, we're Lydia and Mark, and we are adopters. We're parents of 3 children.
Wonderful, thank you. And Leslie?
Hi, I'm Leslie. My husband Anthony and I adopted 2 children through PACT this summer.
Wonderful, thank you. And Emma?
Hi, I'm Emma, and me and my husband adopted 1 little boy in the last couple of months.
Oh, lovely. So thanks for joining us. And so we're just going to ask 2 questions to Bethany and Simon first. And then we've got some questions that we'll put to our adopters in turn. So hopefully we'll get a good overview of adoption in the Christian faith. So first of all, Bethany, can I just ask you to explain the work that Home for Good do?
Yes, so as I mentioned before, we are a Christian charity, and our vision, our aim is to find a home for every child who needs one. So a large part of our work is going across churches, sharing what the local needs are for foster carers and adopters, but then also kind of supporting foster carers and adopters as they kind of explore that journey and what that may mean for them. And we ask churches to kind of think about how they can support their foster carers and adopters as well, and try and equip the churches to be able to do that.
That's wonderful, thank you. So what exactly is your role in Home for Good?
Yeah, so I'm a project worker. So a large part of my role, I go out and I speak in churches. I say about the local needs. Specifically, I work across Berkshire and Oxfordshire area. But then also the bit I absolutely love is when we have people who are interested in finding out about what adoption means and asking questions about that, and I kind of journey with them. So it may be their very early stages of wanting to know a little bit more about what that entails, about the process, or it may be that they're kind of further down that line and ready to start that process. So I journey with them and support them as they go along the journey to becoming adopters and then beyond.
That's wonderful, thank you. So, Beth, what would you say were the most common myths or concerns around Christian adoption, the Christian faith?
So I think a lot of the time when I have people kind of inquire with myself saying, oh, we thought about this in the past, but we've had really negative things. I think in the past, maybe it's seen as a negative if you're a Christian and stepping forward to adopt. But one of the reasons we work with PACT is because actually having that understanding that it's not a negative, and actually the support network you get from a church and that prayer support and that practical support you can get from church is amazing. So often people say, oh, is it going to go against me if I'm a Christian? And some of the other things they'll say is, oh, well, we really feel, we've been praying, we really feel God wants us to adopt. How do I explain that to my adoption agency? So we kind of chat through that and think of ways that kind of makes it understandable for somebody who maybe isn't a Christian and wants to understand where they're coming from with their adoption journey.
That's wonderful, thank you. And Simon, can you just explain to us PACT's approach to Christian adoption, please?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we look back at the history of PACT. We celebrated our centenary a few years ago, and actually PACT was founded as part of the Oxfordshire Diocese. So our roots are very much within the Christian and church community. So we have a lot of experience of working with families who attend church and Christian families, which is absolutely fantastic. And we kind of think about the kind of theme within sort of church families. There's a real sense of people coming forward as Christians and church families to welcome a child or children into their family, a child that's had a very difficult and troubled start to their lives. Some of these children will have additional needs, and it's really important for these children they just feel loved and accepted for who they are, and that they don't just have the adoptive family around them to support them. They've actually got the whole church community there to give not just the child support, but actually the adoptive parents as well. And it's really important, particularly in the early days of a placement where there's a lot of change for everybody, just for the adopters to know they've got family and friends from the church who perhaps can bring meals and support them in all sorts of different practical ways. Another thing which I think can be really good, that one of the things that we look for when people come forward to adopt is for people who've got experience of actually working with children, whether that's in as part of their day-to-day job or in a voluntary capacity. So we find a lot of people will actually go and do some and gain voluntary experience of working with the creche or children or youth groups within churches. And I know at the moment that may be a little bit more difficult, but I guess people can still get some experience of doing that online and virtually. So I think there's so many things that church families have to offer, and we really love and appreciate working with church families.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so we come over to our lovely family today, so we can hear a bit about your stories. So I've just got some questions I'll ask each of you in turn, just so we can get an overview of your experiences. So firstly, Lydia and Mark, can you tell me a little bit about your families, the makeup of and the ages of your children, and how old they were when they came to live with you?
Yeah, so we're a family of 5. We've got a 10-year-old, a 9-year-old, and a 5-year-old. The first 2 were by birth, and the third we adopted, and he came to us pretty much on his 3rd birthday. So we've been a family of 5 now for just over 2 and a bit years.
That's lovely. And Emma, same question to you, a little bit about your family and the makeup and how old they were when they came to you, please.
Yeah, so we are quite new adoptive parents. Our little boy is just over 1 and he came home in the last couple of months, so quite recently.
Wow. Wow, so you've been through the process in the middle of the pandemic, haven't you?
We did
Wow.
the whole thing in the pandemic, yeah.
Wow, amazing. Thank you. And Leslie, same question.
Yes, so we in August brought home a 5-year-old boy. He turned 5 the day before we started introductions. So we did video call for his birthday, which was lovely. So 5-year-old boy and his 6-year-old sister. So they've been home just over 4 months now with us.
Oh, it's lovely. Okay then, so Mark and Lydia, why did you decide to adopt, and what role would you say that your faith played in that decision?
We kind of always thought we would adopt, didn't we? Even in sort of the dating stage, we talked about children, and we talked about the fact that we felt like we wanted to adopt at some point. So yeah,
it was always there, and I think so. Before I was a Christian, I thought I want to adopt one day. I thought my children would come in many ways, and adoption would be one of them. And I think then when I became a Christian and started attending church, for me, adoption was just so normal and so normalized in everything about the Christian message and the Bible. Like everything just speaks about adoption and how I've been adopted by God. You know, for me, it just really became normal to adoption, and that's what faith has done for us. Is that it didn't become this thing out in the sky somewhere, but actually something really normal to do to adopt. And we found that even with our children's faith as well. When we were starting the adoption process for our 2 girls, it was quite normal for them as well to talk about adoption and to think about adoption. We didn't have to explain it too much, really, because it just been in the faith journey, really, for them as well.
It's wonderful, thank you. And Emma, same question to you. Why did you decide to adopt, and how big a part did your faith play in that decision?
Yeah, it played a huge part. Lots of similarities to what Lydia and Mark said, that actually the concept of adoption in the Bible is really prevalent, and but also I think we had talked about adoption quite early on in our marriage. We weren't quite sure kind of how we would start a family. We talked about it. We had heard a lot about the work for Home for Good, and we supported them and read the Home for Good book, and kind of that was really instrumental in, I guess, taking the call seriously that the Bible says that we should be concerned for the vulnerable, we should be concerned for the widows and the orphans. We discovered quite early on it wouldn't be very straightforward for us to have birth children, so we decided to kind of make adoption our positive choice and go, actually, we're going to invest in adoption. We're quite young, we've got a lot we could give, and there are lots of children out there who need a family. And so, yeah, we kind of went down adoption as our positive choice. And yeah, our faith was a huge motivation. Like you said, we believe we're adopted by God, and we wanted to be able to bring a vulnerable child kind of into our family and to care for them.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. And Leslie, the same question to you. Why did you decide to adopt, and what decision did your faith play in it?
So I don't actually remember, but at a really young age, my mum remembers me probably seeing something on television about children in care, and me saying that's not okay, and I'm not going to let that be a thing. And so I think looked after children was always something that was on my heart. Age 21, I was diagnosed with cancer, and I was told, it's kind of too late for any kind of intervention fertility-wise. We need to just get on with treatment. And actually not being bothered by that in the slightest, knowing that for me, my heart was for adoption anyway. And then actually coming to the end of treatment and being told by the doctors, oh, it's all looking good, you'll probably be able to have children, and almost feeling slightly disappointed. And so knowing that for me, actually, yeah, there was this real call of adoption for me. I was single at the time. And when my husband, Anthony, and I actually met on a Christian dating site, and one of our very first conversations was around adoption. It was kind of first date conversation, and actually my husband was adopted as a toddler with his sister, and so it was a real thing for us, and we got married. And actually our honeymoon, the second week of our honeymoon, was me serving on a youth team at Spring Harvest, and we were given the night off as it was our honeymoon to go to a Home for Good adopters session, and we'd already linked up with Home for Good at that point, and that was 7.5 years ago. But for us, even at that point, we knew adoption would be a thing, and so we went really intentionally into our marriage around making sure that we had secure career choices, that we moved house to make sure we had a big enough house, all of those kind of decisions to make sure we had the right sort of home for a child to be adopted into. And then we made the decision that actually we weren't going to try for children, because we felt that it was really important for the children to know that they were our plan A, that they weren't a second choice because we couldn't have children, that we hadn't, that they were the way that we desired to start a family. We'd kind of gone about a bit of a funny way. We'd gone and adopted a few grandparents first. So lots of people at our church didn't have families. We thought we'll start with the widows and then we'll move on. We've got lots of adopted grandparents who are now incredibly adopted great-grandparents to our children and have embraced them in that way. But our heart really, when we made the decision to go into it, I remember at the first PACT information evening being asked by one of the social workers, what do you want? Which is always a funny question, and us saying we want what no one else wants, and so really intentionally looking at statistics of children that were least likely to find a home, and then putting ourselves forward on that slightly daunting and terrifying journey.
Wow, that's incredible, thank you. Okay then, and Lydia and Mark, how did you find the assessment process, and how do you think your faith was viewed during that process?
Yeah, we had a really positive experience. I think we did go in a little bit worried, I suppose, because we're both vicars, so we didn't know how that would be viewed, two church leaders wanting to adopt, but actually we found such support, and I think like what Simon said earlier, actually it was viewed as a real positive, that we belong to this big community that can offer so much support, and the wraparound care that we have was really good. So we would say every angle that we went to, we was met with positivity about it, really. And I think even on our panel, there was someone on our panel that understood how vicars get paid and everything, because on paper it doesn't look too hot, but in reality it's not too bad. And having someone who just even understood that was really, really helpful, wasn't it? Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. And Emma, how did you find the process, and how was your faith viewed during it, do you think?
So we had a bit of a strange assessment process in that we did most of it during lockdown. So we actually met our social worker once and then did the rest of it on Skype, right the way through to panel. So I guess it is intense and it is thorough, but I think a friend had said to us, you can either see it as a positive thing or you can see it as a really negative thing. And actually, I think we came to go, it's really good that it's thorough, because these children really need good, stable families, and also that it is a part of our preparation for that. And there is a lot of preparation as part of the assessment process. So yeah, it was intense. I think it was more intense on Skype than it might have been if you were face to face. But we yeah, it was really positive, and our faith was viewed really positively. And like you said, at both panels, at approval panel and matching panel, it was marked as a real positive that we had this big support network, that we were kind of positively going into adoption, like motivated by our faith. And yeah, so it was really positive, and our social worker really sought to listen to us. And there were some things where we had to kind of explain where we were coming from, but she really sought to listen and to understand us. And yeah, I think it was viewed really positively all the way through.
That's wonderful, thank you. And Leslie?
Yeah, so I think what we came to realise through the process was that the social workers are totally for you. They're not against you. They're not there fighting against you. They're just trying to make sure that you have a really good understanding of what you're letting yourself in for. And I think for us especially, there were definitely questions raised about why a young, potentially fertile couple were choosing to, you know, take on two older children with a huge potential backlog of issues. But I think we felt really well supported through that. And I think in terms of the church, it meant that we'd been in contact. There's a fair few adopted families in our church, and there's also a number of interracial adoptions within our church. And as a part of a multicultural church, it opened up our options that potentially we could have looked at children from other nationalities and cultural backgrounds, should we have should we have found the right child with that kind of background. So it opened up those possibilities for us. The sense of community and support network really strongly shone through. And I think, you know, there were the odd awkward questions. So of course, you know, we're asked how we'd feel if our child came out as homosexual. And for us, that, you know, that was never an issue. We knew where we stood on that. We knew we would love them whatever. I think the other question that probably we hadn't thought would come, but actually we're really glad it did, and we were able to reason through, was it's brilliant that you're so open to this, and that you work, you know, as a teacher, I've worked with people, you know, and I do a lot of work in my school around that sort of thing, but how would your church respond if your child came out as homosexual? And so for us, that was a moment to say, actually, our child comes first, and if there wasn't a positive reception, we'd make sure we found a faith community that was accepting of our child, or our child felt comfortable with, and you know, for us to sit and have a discussion and say, actually, what LGBTQT role models do we have for our child? And we were actually like, yes, you know what, we've got friends that tick all the boxes, which sounds awful to say, but you know, we've got role models for these children in our life. We know that we're in a good place. But those kind of questions do come up, so you do have to be prepared for them and to be able to answer them honestly. But they weren't there to trip us up. They were there to get us just thinking through, like, further along the line, what would we do?
That's wonderful, thank you. Okay then, so Mark and Lydia, can you just tell us a bit about what support you had from your church after placement, and your children were placed with you?
So the church was a wonderful support community. First and foremost, they gave us time off. And they were very generous with the time off, and they were very intentional with their response to us. So, you know, when they said they were giving us time off, they really did. We barely heard from, in terms of work-related stuff, we didn't hear anything for a long time, though we did have lots of people sort of dropping something on the doorstep, knocking, and then running off. So they were really mindful of how they could support us. We had asked a particular family who we had connected with for a long time before that to be sort of a wraparound family for us. So, you know, they would call us and ask how we're doing. They would ask if there's anything specific they could, you know, go to the shops for or anything. And then when it did come back for time for us to sort of start to reintegrate again, they were sort of they ran interference. They were our buffer zone, you know. So if they saw anybody with too much of a glint in their eye approaching us, they would step in the way and just make sure that none of us felt a bit overwhelmed, because being surrounded by a community who love you, you know, they're gonna ask questions. They haven't seen you for a while, so they want to, but it can be a little overwhelming. So they ran interference, and they were just our buffer zone. And the very few people that did have to sort of get, you know, held back a little bit, they were actually quite understanding. And that sort of support hasn't really stopped. You know, we do still get people coming and saying, hey, can I get something, or just randomly giving us gifts and offering their support in ways. So it's been an ongoing show of love.
Yeah, and I think they wanted to learn in the process as well. There was a couple of other children that had been adopted within the family, but more sort of teenager adoption. So when ours was 3 coming in, they really wanted to be sort of led by us as well. So they said, articulate to us what we need to do, because we know what to do when sort of newborn comes. And we was like, basically the same. We're going to be tired, we're going to be new parents to another child, and so they just supported us in, and I think as well for us to accept how they want to love us in that moment was really, really important, and to be honest with people. But for us, the church support also happened with prayer. So on that, the week where you go and meet your child was quite intense, but be able to have a WhatsApp group that we could just WhatsApp and say, this is happening now, can you pray? It's really important for us just to have that prayer support as well. They were good, weren't they?
Wonderful, thank you. And Emma, can you just tell us a bit about the support you had from your church after placement?
Yeah, so we're kind of still relishing in that support, really. We're in quite early days, and they've been wonderful. We've had meals a couple of times a week, people just popping in, but being really understanding about, they're not going to it's COVID, they're not going to be invited in, but that kind of that space they've been really understanding of. One thing that we did before our little one came home was we kind of wrote a letter to the church explaining some kinds of backgrounds that children might have come from. So without kind of telling them about our little one and their specific backgrounds, but some understanding of what they might have been through, and how that might present, how our parenting might be a little bit different, and just some little things about what's really helpful to say and what's really helpful not to say, or actually, please don't be offended if we say we can't answer your question on certain things, because actually we can't. And they were really responsive to that, and it gave an opportunity for them to kind of ask questions and to have conversations before our little boy came home, so that we were having those conversations not in front of him. So that was wonderful. I mean, it's been slightly funny, we weren't back at church face to face when he came home. We only went back in the last couple of weeks. So there's kind of been that natural space that perhaps there wouldn't be in other circumstances. We are more withdrawn naturally by virtue of the circumstances, but again, they've just been so prayerful and so concerned and just so delighted to have him as part of the church family, which is just wonderful. And we know that they're praying, and we know that they are looking out for us, and just the odd text to be like, how are you doing, how are your nights, all that kind of thing. It's been really, really wonderful.
Thank you. Leslie, thank you, that's lovely. Thanks.
Obviously, we brought the children home during COVID, and are still in that situation now. So the church as a whole, we haven't kind of been, the children still haven't been in the church building, but the children have very much felt part of the church. They wanted to be do the online Zoom sessions with our children's church, so they've been included in that, but very much on their own terms. Like, we had a very wobbly moment around a Bible story the other day that's really related to their own life story, and everyone just accepted that, I was rocking a 5-year-old on my lap, and it was absolutely fine. They've been so accepting of their behaviours and that sort of thing. And we've got a great support network of friends through the church. We really early on in the process started a WhatsApp group for friends, so we could just shoot off prayer requests, even from when we started the training, and so they've been there throughout. And it's great, even in the middle of the night when you're sat there with a child that's having a night terror, and you feel very on your own, to know that you can send a message, and normally somebody else is awake and will get back to you, or in the morning they'll just check in on you, and we really valued that. And we also really early on wanted our children to see kind of church as an extended family, and we through lockdown, before children, we were spending a lot of time with our church grandparents, dropping off meals and things like that, and while we passed the baton on to other people, we still wanted to maintain that contact. And it was probably about 2 months in, when we'd just gone and visited 3 families from church and dropped things off for them. And our little girl in the back of the car said, "Mummy, I love how close we are to our church family. That's so nice, isn't it?" And so she very much, feels part of this. She, she asked one of our sets of adopted grandparents at church gave us money for the children, and we bought Bibles, which they wrote messages in. And the other Sunday we were watching church, and our church granddad was preaching, and the kids ran and got their Bibles and came and sat down. So they had the Bibles that they brought them in front, and then wanted to ring and talk to them afterwards. So there's this real sense of belonging for our children, which is just so nice for them, even though they're desperate to get into the church building. They were so angry. We had a church picnic in the summer and they thought we were going to the church, and they were so upset when we turned up at the park. But it was amazing because we'd not seen some of the older people for about 6 months, and some of them said, "I'm getting a bit old and I feel like I've just forgotten that you had children, because your children have just slotted in so nice." They were just quite happy, bouncing around, chatting to everybody, and it was like they had always been there. So yeah, I think the church has just been so welcoming to them and supportive of us, which has been great.
That's amazing. Okay, so Mark and Lydia and Mark, can you just tell us what was it like when you met your children for the first time?
I think I was, for all 3 of them, so 2 came through birth, 1 through adoption. I had the same feeling with all 3 of them. I think, when they handed to me as a newborn, or when we saw our little boy on our first glimpse meeting, which was really bizarre, in his little house with his little Peppa Pig blanket, it felt exactly the same. It just felt like this gift being handed to me. So all of our children, I feel, a gift. They're on loan by God, placed in our love and to nurture and to reflect something of God to them. And so when we met our little adopted boy, I think it felt exactly the same. I remember just seeing him there and just feeling like this real gift has been handed to our family, and it felt exactly the same, apart from that it would have been a bit weird on first glimpse to just go and cuddle him and kiss him. It was really hard to have to play building blocks with him and just stare at him, but not too great life. But just a gift. That's all I could explain, and it felt exactly the same with all 3 of them, and I never expected to have that sort of feeling when I first met him.
I found it quite surreal for myself, because obviously you feel like you kind of know him already, because you've gone through the paperwork, you've been staring at this photograph for weeks, and so it was, for me personally, I was very conscious of how hard I was trying to impress him, because I was like, I'd already committed myself to him. I was like, this is the one, so we're going for it. I don't care what I see or what happens, we're doing this. And so I trying very hard without looking like I was trying very hard to impress him, so that he would want us as family when the time came to do that. It was very odd, but also just very exciting as well, to finally transition from a photograph to the person. Because then you get to see the little nuances and the mannerisms at play that a photograph just doesn't show you. So.
Yeah, I think from the moment we sort of said, yes, we want to pursue him, even at that first glimpse, it's meant to see if it's going to work or not. It was more on him. He needed to decide if it was going to work. Because we'd decided, it was like, even if we turn up there and actually he's got 3 heads or something, we're taking it. We don't care. We'd already committed, hadn't we? So it was more just an opportunity to see him. So for us, it was just, we just knew for sure, as soon as we saw him, we was like, we need ours, as long as everything goes through and we don't do anything too crazy. We just wanted him.
That's lovely, thank you. And Emma, what's it like for you when you met your son for the first time?
So we had this funny in-between period where we had a week of virtual introductions, which a 1-year-old and video calling is quite hard work. Lots of puppets, lots of singing. So actually, when we got there, it felt like a relief. I thought I was going to be really, really nervous turning up at the foster carers on that first day, but actually it felt like a relief that we were just all in the same room and that we could see him in the flesh.
Mm.
And it was just, yeah, it was wonderful. I remember standing on the doorstep thinking, oh my goodness, this is massive. And then suddenly like this child just comes crawling out at you and you're just on the floor, and it feels really surreal and really normal all at the same time. Because yeah, like Mark said, you feel like you know them already. And then just suddenly you're there and they're crawling all over you and wanting cuddles. And yeah, it was just wonderful. And I think kind of passes in a bit of a blur. Like I remember writing things down from each day in introductions, just like I want to remember these little moments, because it does just kind of pass in a blur. But yeah, just wonderfully exciting and so precious, really precious.
Oh, thank you. Leslie?
Yeah, obviously our children were a bit older, so they'd been waiting for a family for 2 years, and they were excitedly waiting on the doorstep when we arrived. We had video calls for the week before we arrived, and yeah, it was just really natural. We kind of had pre-planned with them what we were going to do. So my daughter and I had lengthy discussions about what colour she was going to paint my nails. So that was the first task. We both painted each other's nails. I still have it. My big toe still has about that much of nail. I'm not allowed to take it off. We've just got to wait for it to grow out. And then, of course, my son wanted to paint my husband's nails, so that then happened. And it just felt really natural. We were only meant to be there 2 hours. We ended up staying for lunch and then parting ways. And the next day we pulled into the driveway and they were stood at the door, ready and waiting. And they just felt like ours straight off. I kind of went in with really limited trying to limit my expectation, even with the first video call, thinking, when you go wedding dress shopping, people say, oh, you'll know it's the one, and you'll get all these feelings. I definitely didn't get that over a wedding dress. And I remember thinking to myself, like, it's okay, like these are your children, you've made this decision, it's okay to not feel this rush of love and all of these things. And we came with the first video call and I was like, wow, like my expectations have been like blown out the window. They are amazing, they feel like ours. And on the second day, you could tell they wanted to say something, but they just couldn't do it. And we were playing with a writing tablet, and my daughter wrote "I love you, mummy" on the writing tablet, and then ran away and hid. And that was a real pattern. Over the few days, both of them, they'd say "I love you," and then they'd run away and hide from us. And it was just lovely to kind of see that desire that they had to attach to us, and obviously we wanted to attach to them. And yeah, it went way smoother and better than expected. It doesn't mean there weren't issues. There were definitely moments of like, help, and PACT were there to support us through that. So but yeah, definitely kind of they very much felt like ours from the get-go. And someone described me the other day as a tiger mum, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's a horrendous term. And then my friend was like, no, that's incredible, because you feel like you love them fiercely and you feel like they're mum. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's actually, although it sounds like a negative term, that's a really good thing that after 4 months, that is how I feel for these strangers that have just invaded my home, essentially. But yeah, so I mean, you do get all the emotions attached that you would hope for, I think.
Oh, it's lovely. Thank you for sharing that with us. And just a final question, Lydia, Mark, what would you say to anybody people considering adoption, and what would be your top tips?
Do it. Don't stop considering it, just do it. It's hard, and it's beautiful, and it's crazy, and it's joyful. My top tip would be, I think, for us, what we found quite helpful was we committed in the whole process. The paperwork can seem overwhelming at times, so we committed ourselves 1 evening a week. We were going to just look at paperwork and do paperwork, and then through the rest of the week, we weren't going to worry about it too much. And we found that was quite helpful, because otherwise it can feel like, oh, it's just overwhelming and we should do it, but you don't want to do it because it's so big. But when you make that commitment of 1 night a week, you get through it really quite easily, actually. It's not as bad as it seems.
Yeah. And I think for me, it'd be yourself. I know that's such a thing, like be yourself, but honestly, be yourself. Because when the rubber hits the road, your house isn't going to look perfect anymore, and you're not always going to look great. And because at the end of the day, yourself is what the child is going to get. Your child's going to get the messy hair and the morning breath and all of that. They're not going to get the perfect house. They're going to get you. So I would say just make that commitment from the get-go, to be yourself in the process. And even when the social workers come around, just be yourself as much as you can, because that's who the child needs and what the child wants.
It's lovely, thank you. And now, Emma.
Yeah, I think what we always kind of said was we'd take it one step at a time and just kind of prayerfully say, okay, God, are you going to open this door or close this door? And right from the very beginning, like the first information evening, we said, okay, we're going to go. We're going to take it a step at a time and go, is there anything that's stopping us now? No, right, we're just going to carry on. And actually the assessment process is a process of working out whether adoption is right for you, or you know, whether you're right for adoption and all of that kind of thing. And just taking it a step at a time and going, okay, like we'll just keep going and keep prayerfully going. We actually felt really daunted by the matching process. We thought, how are we going to know which child? And I think just really prayerfully committing that, okay, that God will lead and guide you. And we really felt that really strongly, and had people around us praying that God would just make it really clear which child was right for our family. So yeah, I think taking it a step at a time and just kind of prayerfully committing those steps. Second thing I think would be find other adopters to talk to. We had quite a few that we knew already through mainly churches locally, but having other adopters to talk to and to quiz, and that's been really helpful now at the very beginning of placement. You know, it does throw up different worries and different emotions early on, and to have people who just get that, who you can ring and be like, oh, I'm really worried about this today, and they just totally get it, is really, really helpful. And there are loads of different ways, and we had lots of friends. I also connected with other adopters on Instagram. There's lots on there. So just find ways of connecting with other adopters. I think that's a really, really helpful part of the process.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emma. Rosie?
I think it's about remembering that actually this process is not about you. So obviously all the social workers questioning is around you and your life, but ultimately this is about the children that are out there that need a home. So the times when it feels really tough, it's not because it's about you, it's about finding the best possible home for these children. And it's not about you creating a perfect rosy family, because adoption is probably not going to do that for you. It's about what you can offer some children that really need a home. And the other thing is to use people and to use organisations. There's loads out there. I mean, I'm not ashamed to say, after our first social worker meeting, it wasn't particularly awful, but it just dredged up this sense of what on earth am I doing? And I was talking about it at school, and someone said, we've got a great school counsellor that's free. Why don't you just book to see her? And so I did. And you know what? After 1 hour with this counsellor, I came out with, in my head, a list of 5 things that I was absolutely terrified about, and was able to come home and share those with my husband. And then we just moved on. But if I hadn't kind of shouted for help at that moment, and that person hadn't suggested it in the matching process, I felt, you know, our social worker was on holiday and there was stuff going on, and I felt in turmoil. And I emailed Home for Good and said, I don't think this is what you do, but is there somebody I can talk to? And amazingly, you know, someone rang me on the Monday and spent an hour chatting with me and praying with me, and again just refocusing me on what I was doing. And it really reminded me again, it wasn't about me, it was about these children and the end goal. But yeah, so drawing on that helped to remind you of that, because you do on occasion feel like you're going a little bit loopy with all the paperwork and meetings and trying to balance normal life, you know, and people around you, you know, they know how to support a pregnant woman, they know what the time scale is, they know, you know, but you've got work saying, well, when are you going on leave, and when's then? You're like, I have no idea. So it's really helpful just shouting for help when you need it, and there is so much help and support out there.
That's wonderful, thank you. Bethany, did you have a question that you wanted to ask? No? Okay.
No, just to say it's been amazing to hear their stories and how I think one of the big things that we've heard at Home for Good is how churches really do wrap around foster carers and adopters, and churches are amazing at providing food a lot of the time. I don't know if it's the same in your church, but our church, a lot of the activities around food. And so just dropping around meals, but understanding, you know, you can't meet the child yet because you're in that early stages, but just, yeah, providing meals, setting up support groups. There's quite a few churches now who have set up support groups specifically for foster carers and adopters, so that you can kind of have fellowship with others who they won't be going through exactly the same thing, but just have the understanding, and just to be able to be there and either pray together or talk together or shout together. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you. We've got a few questions. What support is on offer from PACT once the children come home? Simon, can you answer that question, please?
Yes, one of the things that we've put a lot of planning and emphasis on in recent years has been the development of our post-adoption support services. The first one I'd like to start by talking about is the Adopt a Hub, which has won a number of awards as a really creative source of support for adoptive families. On our hub, we have a whole range of resources, including sort of award-winning webinars from psychologists and other experts in the field of adoption. And we add a sort of a new webinar every kind of 10 to 14 days. And a number of local authorities have bought into that recently. So that's freely available to all our adoptive families from the minute they start the assessment process with us, and then that remains free of charge for the foreseeable future. The other thing that there are then two other forms of support available. The local authority that placed the children with you and the own local authority in the area in which you work, they run post-adoption support services, and you're entitled to access those as any adoptive parent. But we also have some creative adoption support services of impact. We have a team of adoption support workers, adoption social workers who focus very much on providing adoption support. We also have a team of adopter champions who are themselves adoptive parents who are available to give one-to-one individual support to our adopters. They can just talk about their own experiences, and it's great for our adopters because they know they're speaking to somebody who's been through it. Apologies, I've got a dog in the background who's running around getting excited about something they've seen out the window. But and then we have our own specialist therapeutic team. So we have a range of psychologists and other specialist therapists that we can draw on that should our family need support, and our support, and we remain there and really throughout the whole process and the foreseeable future, certainly until the time that your children have reached the age of 18 and beyond if necessary. The other thing is that very often resources can be regional based, and you get the sort of the famous postcode lottery. There is currently the Adoption Support Fund, which means that no matter where you live, you will be entitled to the same pot of money. And that's something that we can arrange for applications to be made through the Adoption Support Fund.
Wonderful, thank you, Simon.
And just to say, all we say to our families is just email us, message us, or pick up the phone, and then we're available and we'll respond very quickly.
Thank you. And just another question, Beth, to you, Bethany. Do you take up references from church ministers? And just some questions around the referencing process.
Yeah, so with any agency or local authority that you'll go to, they'll in stage 1 with PACT, you'll have references done on you, and if you choose to have your church minister as reference, then they'll do reference with them. Normally, if you do, as we were talking about earlier, you do some voluntary work within the church with children, then they'll want a reference with the worker who's appropriate to kind of see how that's gone and how you've been with working with the children in the church.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last question for you, Simon. How important is faith in the matching process?
I think people really commented, it's really appreciated, and we recognise that people's faith is an important part of their identity, an important part of their support, and that when people perhaps need a bit of extra support, they can turn to prayer, but also they can turn to the church community for support. And we've already talked about the wide range of support, whether it's meals or just people they can talk to. And we find that, generally speaking, that people who are part of a church and faith community, that their network of support tends to be perhaps larger than many other people's, and they may have, somebody talks about having adopted grandparents around. They're more likely to have perhaps people around during the day and people who've got experience of looking after or working with children who can wrap around them to give that support. As well as the fact that we often ask people to go and find voluntary work with children, and sometimes it's not necessarily always easy to find that, but if you're part of a church community, then you do have access very often to children and youth work that people can become involved with.
That's wonderful, thank you very much. Well, that's been really informative, and thank you, Lydia and Mark, Leslie and Emma, for giving up your afternoon to share your stories with us. And thank you, Simon and Bethany. And I just wish you the most wonderful Christmas. It's going to be fantastic to see if you all. So yeah, thank you for joining us. And for more information, please have a look at our website, pactcharity.org, or there's lots of information on Home for Good website as well. So thank you, everybody, and I wish you a happy Christmas and a peaceful New Year. Thank you for joining us. Bye.